joined today by Katherine Hochstetler from the Centre for International Governance Innovation in Canada to talk to me about development banks in the developing world and the impact of the new BRICS Development Bank. Katherine, thanks for joining us. So despite the vast differences amongst the individual BRICS members, we've seen a large amount of coordination in the formation of the BRICS New Development Bank. What do you think has been the rationale behind the formulation of this bank?
I think that if you read what the BRICS countries wrote about their new development bank, that clearly part of the intention is to take on the traditional financiers, because they say very clearly that one of the rationales for setting up these new financial institutions is because the existing institutions have not changed quickly enough to take account of their power. But I think they also have a lot of South-South solidarity motivations, that this is the group of countries to which they would like to provide more development finance. And I think South Africa has taken a particularly strong stance in support of that, in really wanting to try to make money available for African development needs.
Many people have pinned their hopes on the new development bank to be an ideological counterpoint to the traditional development finance institutions, such as the Bretton Woods institutions, both in terms of the types of projects that they might finance and in terms of developing alternative development philosophies and financing models. To what extent do you think that might be the case?
Well, the BRICS countries have been very clear that they believe in national sovereignty and that countries shouldn't be forced to change their development models just in order to get development finance. On the other hand, they're talking at the same time about trying to raise additional sources of capital on international capital markets. And so far, international capital markets have not been willing to make loans to other entities that would then loan it on, as the new development bank plans to do, unless there are financial conditions met for those loans. So I think even though the BRICS have articulated a desire to loan in a new way, it will be difficult for them to do that if they really do plan to raise a lot of money on international financial markets.
Despite the BRICS Development Bank being new, there obviously has been existing a large network of development banks in the developing world. What impact do you think the new BRICS Development Bank will have on the operations and the role that they play in their respective regions?
Well, that's a good question, because I think it will play out somewhat differently for the different BRICS members. So when you have a bank like Brazil's BNDES, which is really oriented around supporting Brazilian firms abroad, I think that that will go on continuing, because that continues to be a very real priority for Brazil. For other banks like China, which has a lot of reserves, they will be able to pursue a number of different financing options, and we see them doing that within the context of the BRICS and outside of it. For some of the other countries like Russia and India and also South Africa that have seen comparatively less development finance, I think the BRICS New Development Bank will actually become one of the primary actors through which they make their lending. And so it has a somewhat different impact on the different banks.
Looking at the African context, arguably the most important financing need relates to infrastructure. What impact do you think the new BRICS Development Bank will have on the provision of infrastructure financing in Africa, given that its first regional office is going to be headquartered in South Africa?
Pretty clearly, the BRICS New Development Bank, I think, is intended to help to fill some of that infrastructure need. With the amount of capital they have at the moment, the 50 billion in subscribed capital, that's not going to go very far to meeting Africa's needs. So I think it will operate in the African continent really more as an additional source of money rather than a real game changer, unless they manage to raise quite a bit more money than at the moment it seems like they might.
Thanks very much for your time, Katherine.